Everyone, this is Adicon Podfic, back with another podfic. Today I'll be reading The Mist Protects by Tea Party Cannon, and this will be Chapter 2, Strange Demon. Hey, Mui, see if you can fit in here. Nuichiro sat back to observe his handiwork. With Kyojiro's help, they had fashioned together a tightly woven basket using the wood and bamboo stalks scattered around the house. They would need some way for Muichiro to travel during the daytime, and this basket was their best option. Still, Muichiro couldn't help but think the basket looked somewhat small. He and his brother weren't big by any definition, but he wondered if Muichiro could really fit comfortably inside. He watched as his younger twins stared blankly at the basket for several seconds before crawling inside. It definitely didn't look comfortable with how scrunched in he was, but somehow he did fit, and Kyojiro was able to close the lid over him. "Are you sure you don't wish for me to carry him, Tokito?" Kyojiro asked, now back to that annoyingly loud and chipper tone of voice. "It would be quite easy for me." "Hell no, you were going to cut off his head an hour ago," Yuichiro snapped. "I'm his brother. I'm carrying him." Without waiting for a response, Yuichiro grabbed the straps of the basket and hefted it into the air. Except where he expected the weight of his twin to be, there was next to nothing, and Yuichiro stumbled off balance. But before he could hit the ground, he felt a pair of calloused hands grab him and hold him up. Kyojiro grinned down at him. "You should be more careful, Tokito." Once the moment of shock passed, Yuichiro felt his face heat up from pure fury. Let go of me, you stupid owl face." "You are welcome." "I didn't—" Ugh. Yuichiro couldn't tell if he was being messed with or if the slayer was genuinely this dense. He freed himself from Kyojo's grasp and looked at Muichiro's basket in his hand. It still felt like he was holding only the basket with nothing inside. Mui, you in there?" "Yeah." His twin's voice was unmistakable, and he sighed in relief. Still, he remained confused. Was this a demon thing? He'd heard demon kids change their form. Could they make themselves lighter, too? He considered asking Kyojiro, then remembered his previous anger and decided not to. "Are you ready?" Amane asked from near the doorway. "It would be best to leave while we still have hours of daylight remaining." Yuichiro's anger was doused by a sudden somberness. He looked around the house one last time. Small and run down as it was still home. Their parents' graves were here, and all their memories, too. But just as the nostalgia was starting to get the better of him, Yuichiro remembered himself and shook his head in disgust. He and his brother had nothing to gain from such sentimentality. Better to leave now before they made it any harder on themselves. The boy nodded and slipped the basket onto his back, though it was still unbelievably light. He could feel his twin's presence within. It gave him comfort and the strength of will he needed. "Yeah, let's go." Yuichiro stepped into the sunlight, and for a moment he felt worried that the basket wasn't knit tight enough that the sun would reach his brother, but Muichiro remained calm beside him, and Yuichiro let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. With Amane and Kyojiro behind him, Yuichiro refused to look back as he and Muichiro left their childhood home for the final time. How far are we going to go, anyway? Yuichiro wasn't sure how long they'd been walking. He'd estimated they left in late afternoon, but now the sun was setting, painting the sky shades of yellow and orange. All he could tell was that they were almost off the mountain, and while there was a village at the base of the mountain, he doubted the Ubiyashiki estate was there. They were going in the wrong direction for that, anyway. Exhaustion was slowly but surely creeping up at him as he voiced his question. He was in no way surprised that Kyojiro was still going strong, but he couldn't fathom how Amane was still walking so gracefully in such fancy clothes. He wished he could at least talk to Muichiro, break up the monotony of travel, but his brother seemed to have fallen asleep or something. Only the feeling of his presence assured him he was still there. "We won't be able to reach the estate before nightfall, so we'll be staying at one of the corpse's rest stops tonight. Don't worry, though. It's not much farther," Amane explained. Yuichiro nodded and kept walking. No use in wasting energy complaining. After about 10 more minutes of travel, Amane stopped. "We're here." Yuichiro peered around her, and his eyes widened at the sight of a large wooden building amongst the trees. He had lived on his mountain his whole life, and never once knew this was here. Compared to his own home, it was like a mansion. The image of a wisteria flower adorned the doorway to what he guessed was an inn. "Quickly now, before night falls!" Kyojiro ushered him in. Yuichiro didn't need to be told twice, eager to finally rest after such an exhausting day. The staff were already waiting at the entrance, clearly expecting their arrival. Within minutes, all 4 of them were settled in a cozy bedroom. Their caretakers closed the sliding door with a click, and once he was sure they were gone, Yuichiro removed the basket from his back and sat it on the ground. "All right, Mui, it's safe to come out now." He started to open the lid as he spoke, but as he did, a tendril of wispy white fog escaped through the gap he'd created. Yuichiro froze, not quite comprehending what he was seeing, and in that time the misty tendril retreated back into the basket. A second later, the lid popped off as Muichiro sprang up with an annoyed grunt. Yuichiro blinked and decided whatever that was, it wasn't worth worrying about now. "How are you feeling?" "Hungry," he said bluntly. Mortified, Yuichiro sprang up and punched his twin in the arm. "Don't say that in front of the Demon Slayer, stupid." Muichiro didn't seem bothered by the punch and merely sat down on the floor. He stared silently at Kyojiro, who stared back quizzically. He was still smiling, though. What a weirdo. Muichiro does seem quite different from other demons, Kyojuro observed. He's quite strange, in fact. Why is that? If I knew that, I'd tell you. He just is. Muichiro paused, then added with a glare. Different, I mean, not strange. Perhaps you'd be willing to tell us what happened the night your brother was turned, Nahashiro suggested. It may provide us with answers. Muichiro scoffed and sat down next to his twin. I doubt it. I barely know anything myself. When we were attacked, I got injured and couldn't move. I think Muichiro fought the demon, but by the time I saw him again, he was already turned. But I'm pretty sure the demon that attacked us and the demon who turned Muichiro aren't the same. He didn't mention the dream, nor the mysterious thing he'd seen Muichiro eating before he blacked out. He still vividly remembered waking back up in the house with those glowing eyes peering at him from the darkness. He's not proud of how loud he had screamed. You believe there were 2 demons there that night? Kyojuro asked. Muichiro nodded and turned to his brother, waiting for him to speak, but Muichiro looked hesitant, so after a moment he reached over and took his brother's hand in his own. Empty, turquoise eyes widened ever so slightly in response. Come on, Mui, tell him what you saw. 6 eyes. Muichiro fell silent after that. Kyojuro seemed to expect him to elaborate, but when he didn't, his smile fell. Is that all? Muichiro nodded, and Kyojuro looked thoughtful. 6 eyes. Must refer to the demon. Perhaps it is indeed an upper moon. Why do you think that? Muichiro couldn't help but ask. What is an upper moon, anyway? The upper moons are the 6 strongest demons under the command of the demon king Musa Kibuzuji. Only Kibuzuji, or the upper moons who possess his blood, have the power to turn a human into a demon. This also supports there being 2 demons, since if the upper moon attacked you with the intent to kill, you would not be alive right now, young Muichiro. Was there a number in the demon's eyes? Muichiro was going to chide him for trying to force answers his brother didn't have, but then Muichiro nodded. His jaw dropped as Muichiro lifted up a hand and, after much deliberation, slowly raised up a single clawed finger. Upper 1. Kyojuro's eyes went wide. Muichiro looked at him for answers, but surprisingly it was Amane who spoke instead. Upper Moon 1. That would be the strongest of the upper moons, and the most powerful demon behind Kibuzuji himself. What? Are you kidding? You're kidding, right? You're saying we were attacked by a demon that strong. Why? Muichiro couldn't believe it. The second most powerful demon? Why would someone like that be wandering around the mountain? He couldn't imagine how they were even still alive at this point, and why would Upper Moon 1 turn his brother into a demon in the first place? Why, indeed? Kyojuro seemed to have recovered from his shock. He put back on that ill-fitting smile. Unfortunately, we do not know. Still, you are lucky to have survived such an experience. Muichiro scowled. It seemed the only person who would know would be the upper moon itself, but the idea of going after someone like that for answers was pure insanity. Well, there was nothing to be gained from looking to the past now, so Muichiro turned his thoughts to the near future. What's going to happen once we get to the estate? To Muichiro, you mean? Kyojuro asked, and he nodded. That is for the master to decide, whether he vouches for your brother's safety or not. No demon slayer would dare to go against his word. Muichiro thought that this master must be someone quite fearsome if all the slayers followed his word without question, but it was only the master's words that his brother was still alive now, so he prayed that his mercy would remain once he saw the truth. Forgive me for interrupting, Amane spoke. She had sat by the window all this time, and a crow was perched on her hand. But I should inform you that we are experiencing visitors soon. Huh? Visitors? Muichiro repeated. A glance at Kyojuro showed that he was just as confused. Visitors? Who might that be? I can't explain it this time, but do not be alarmed. Master Biyashiki has been informed of your situation, and this is a necessary step before we can depart for the manor. They should be here within 2 nights, so we will remain here until then. Muichiro balked at that. 2 nights? They were going to be stuck here for that long. This manor was a nice place, certainly much nicer than his own home, but still, he didn't want to be with these people any longer than he had to. Muichiro's grip on his hand tightened, bringing him back to the moment. Muichiro hadn't even realized he was still holding on to him. Don't worry. We'll be okay. A moment of silence passed. Muichiro realized his breathing and racing heart were slowing. He squeezed Muichiro's hand back. Yeah, it'll be okay. He wished he could believe that. It was on the second night in the Wisteria Inn when the mysterious visitors arrived. Muichiro was thoroughly bored. He'd already changed his bandages and finished his nightly routine, so now he was listlessly watching his brother as he engaged in a staring contest with Kyojuro. Well, sort of, as Kyojuro was blinking quite frequently, shaking his head every few seconds before going right back to staring. You should probably stop doing that, Muichiro told him. You'll damage your brain or something. Then again, the man was already so strange that it likely wouldn't make any difference. Ha! Then you've noticed it as well, the slayer asked. Muichiro nodded. How could he not? He'd realized quickly that gazing into his brother's demonized eyes had a strange effect. Every time he stared for too long, he'd find his mind clouding over. His thoughts and movements slowed. It was unnerving, so he tried to avoid it as much as he could. It is certainly a blood demon art, to hinder an opponent's thoughts and reactions with mere eye contact. What a fearsome ability! Kyojuro sounded impressed. I must do my best to develop a resistance to it. Muichiro glared. Did he think that he might have to fight Muichiro in the future? He's not doing it on purpose. I understand. There are many examples of passive blood demon art such as this. Yuichiro sighed and continued idly watching his brother. More specifically, he watched the way Muichiro's long hair lazily floated and fluttered in an unfelt wind. It was just something it did every so often since becoming a demon. Is that a blood demon art? Is that a blood demon art too? Kyojuro opened his mouth, only to stop as a voice spoke from behind the sliding door. Lady Ubishiki, your guests have arrived. Please, let them in, Amane ordered, suddenly setting the book she'd been reading aside. The door opened, and Muichiro started to growl. Yuichiro quickly reached out and took his hand to try and keep him calm. Kyojuro also looked on edge suddenly, hand gripping his sheathed blade. Yuichiro didn't understand the reason why until he looked at their guests himself. Standing at the door were a woman in a flowery kimono and a young blue-haired boy. They looked normal at first glance, but something about them felt off. It was the same sort of feeling he got looking at Muichiro, something that seemed human but wasn't. Then were these... Good evening, the woman bowed. My name is Tomio, and I am a doctor. This is my assistant Yushiro. The boy, Yushiro, gave an unfriendly grunt of acknowledgment as he warily surveyed the room. Kyojuro looked confused, but still on guard. A doctor, but you are... Demons, yes. I assure you, we mean you no harm, Tomio explained. Master Ibishiki and Lady Amane requested our assistance in regards to the Tokito situation. Huh, what do you... It is true, Amane interrupted, causing Yuichiro to fall silent. Master Ibishiki and Lady Tomio have been in contact for a long while now. Like us, she is also opposed to Kibijiji. What? Is this true? Kyojuro looked shocked. Tomio nodded, her eyes narrowed, a barely contained anger lighting her words. It is. I despise that man, that monster, for what he has done. I spent centuries searching for a way to defeat him once and for all. Wait, what do you mean you're here about our situation? Yuichiro asked with a suspicious glare. Well, as I said, I'm a doctor, and I've conducted extensive research into demons over many years, Tomio explained as she stepped forward and knelt down in front of the twins. You are Yuichiro, I presume? He nodded. Yeah, I am, and this is... He stopped as he caught sight of the expression on Muichiro's face. He was staring at Tomio with an intense focus, unblinking. His mouth was set in a hard grimace that showed his fangs, and his body was tense and trembling. Yuichiro couldn't help a sudden feeling of worry. His brother looked like he was in pain. Mui? Yushiro's slitted eyes narrowed as he put a hand between Tomio and Muichiro. Lady Tomio, you shouldn't be so close. This one doesn't seem... Muichiro's irises shrunk before he snarled and lunged forward, sinking his teeth into Yushiro's hand. God, get off, you mangy! The demon boy yelled and tried to shake him off. Muichiro responded by growling and biting even harder, earning another string of yelling and insults. Mui! Yuichiro shouted in alarm. He looked at Kyojuro for some kind of help or guidance, but the Hashira looked just as lost, his sword half drawn. Clearly the sight of a demon attacking another demon was not a common occurrence. Amane also seemed surprised, but she wasn't a fighter, so it's not like he could expect her to do anything anyway. A ripping sound brought his attention back to his brother, and he almost fainted at the sight of the severed hand held in Muichiro's mouth, bone exposed and still dripping blood. Yuichiro held the stump of his hand and let out a string of curses Yuichiro had never even heard of before. It was clear that he was more indignant than actually in pain over being attacked, and Yuichiro might have even found it funny if he wasn't so horrified by the fact that his brother had just ripped someone's hand off. Muichiro! Yuichiro finally found his voice again. You drop that right now! Muichiro growled in response, and Yuichiro's temper flared up. Don't you growl at me! You listen to me and drop that hand right this instant! Did he really just say that? But this whole situation was absurd. To think that a week ago their lives had been normal, miserable, but normal, and now here he was, scolding his demonized twin like a misbehaving dog to let go of a severed hand. Was this the god's idea of a sick joke? Tears prickled at the corner of his eyes. Why? Why did nothing ever go right for them? What god had they angered to deserve this? Muichiro's growling stopped. The hand fell from his mouth and landed on the floor with a dull thud, along with a couple drops of water. Yuichiro looked up and blinked away the tears to see Muichiro crying himself, tears falling freely from his eyes. Sorry, he muttered, hanging his head. Sorry. It's okay. It's not your fault. Yuichiro squeezed his hand for assurance. It was all the fault of that damned demon that turned him, the one with 6 eyes. Anger burned in his chest at the demon that dared to make his brother cry. But as he calmed down, he began to worry for Muichiro's safety. If he attacked that boy, then was there a chance he'd attack humans? Would he have to be killed after all? Yuichiro couldn't bear the thought. Muichiro let out a hum, his clawed hand picked up Yuichiro's severed one, and he timidly held it out to the boy in question. Here, sorry. Yuichiro turned away with an indignant glare. Keep it, your saliva's all over it now. Besides, I've already grown a new one. It was true. The demon boy's stump had almost completely reformed into an entirely new hand, muscle and skin growing over the bones of his fingers. Yuichiro was both fascinated and a little sickened by the sight. How interesting. Tamio finally spoke up. She'd been silent throughout the entire affair, simply observing. She moved closer to Muichiro, who shrank back nervously. Don't be scared. I just want to ask you some questions. What have you been eating since becoming a demon? Birds. Rabbits. It seemed like there was something else he wanted to say, but he hesitated and fell silent. Tamio smiled kindly. Have you eaten any humans? Muichiro quickly shook his head. Then, have you eaten any demons? There was another moment of hesitation, and then Muichiro nodded. Huh? When did you do that? Yuichiro asked. It's not like demons were common on the mountain, and Yuichiro had spent every night alongside his brother since his transformation. If he'd left somewhere in the middle of the night, he'd know. Unless... First night, Muichiro answered slowly. Woke up, eating. The first night, suddenly it made sense. The thing he'd been eating in the dream, that black thing in his mouth, it'd been the arm of the demon that attacked them. How can that be? Kyoto spoke up. Demons do not hunt other demons, at least not when human prey is readily available. It is not in their nature. I already told you, Mui's different from other demons, Yuichiro retorted. He felt relieved that, given the choice between eating him or the demon, Muichiro had chosen the demon. He felt pride, too. His brother's kind heart hadn't been extinguished by his transformation. It would seem so. Perhaps after your brother turned, the first thing he ate was demon flesh. If he hadn't eaten human flesh, then he simply might not have the taste for it. Perhaps that has helped him to resist attacking humans, Tamio said thoughtfully. Yuichiro nodded. That made enough sense. Is that why he attacked you guys, then? Tamio nodded. I suspect he's quite hungry, if he's only been eating animals up to this point. Yuichiro figured as much, though he still couldn't help feeling guilty at the thought. Logically, he knew there wasn't anything he could do about it, but he never wanted his little brother to go hungry. Tamio reached into a bag at her side and pulled out an empty syringe. She edged closer to Muichiro, who stayed put this time and spoke in a gentle voice. I'm going to draw some of your blood for my research. Is that okay, Muichiro? His brother nodded, and he didn't even flinch as the needle entered his skin. Once Tamio had filled the syringe, she set it aside and took out another small syringe with a red liquid inside. When she looked at Muichiro again, their eyes met. Her calm smile fell into a frown, and she hummed. What is it? Muichiro couldn't help but ask. How curious. Kibutsuji's curse is weak within you. She spoke more to his brother than to him. An effect of your bloodline, perhaps? I understand you were descendants of the first breathing users. Yuichiro rolled his eyes. Did everyone know about that? What does that matter? And what's this curse you're talking about? Perhaps it matters more than you think, if you're truly descendants of that man. Tamio paused, then shook her head. No, it's too soon to say. My apologies. Yuichiro really wanted to know what the hell she meant by that, but it was clear that Tamio was done talking about it. As for the curse, Kibutsuji has a connection with all his demons. He can see through their eyes and hear their thoughts, even control them to an extent. Ueshiki requested our aid to remove this curse before bringing you to his estate. Tamio readied the syringe as she explained. It seems the task is already half done, but this medicine will help as well. Is that okay, Muichiro? His brother nodded again. Muichiro reluctantly allowed her to continue, but he still watched vigilantly as Tamio administered the medicine. Muichiro still didn't react in the slightest as the needle pierced his arm, but seconds after the liquid was pushed in, his eyes started to drift shut. He wobbled, and Muichiro reached forward to catch him before he fell over. Panic rose briefly before he realized that his twin had only fallen asleep. Do not worry, he'll simply need to rest for a few hours while the medicine takes effect, the demon doctor explained. In the meantime, we must take our leave. Oh, so soon? Kyoto asked, voicing Yuichiro's thoughts. Not that he really cared whether they stayed or not. My apologies, but while we're traveling like this, we don't have our usual defenses against Kibutsuji's detection. We wouldn't want to put you in danger. Fear not, Lady Tamio. I will handle any demons that dare to come here. Thank you for your assistance, Tamio. Amane bowed her head gratefully. I'm happy to help. A demon who doesn't attack humans. Such a thing is almost unheard of. But it gives me hope that... She stopped and stared almost wistfully at Muichiro, then turned to leave. Yuichiro right behind her. Wait, Yuichiro called before she could go, a desperate question suddenly springing to life in his mind. Can a demon be turned back into a human? If anyone would know, it'd have to be her, right? This doctor who researched demons. Tamio looked surprised for a moment, then contemplative. There may be a way. For the first time in a long time, Muichiro felt hope. And that is the end of Chapter 2 of The Miss Protects. I hope you all enjoyed. Hope you'll have a good night or day wherever you are. And I will see you in the next one. There's no ramble this time. I don't really have... Oh, wait. I went on a trip to UW. And, like, with a bunch of people in my trio program. And it was so much fun. Actually, I got a lot closer to one of my friends because she was the one going, but we don't have a lot of one-on-one conversations because she's a year ahead of me, in school. And so we don't really get a lot of one-on-one interactions except for breakfast and lunch, and then someone sits between us at the table, and also like there's people talking all the time, so we don't ever really get the chance to have a one-on-one, but we did, and we're so much closer now, and it was so much fun. Um, Anyway, that's really all I have to talk about. So bye everyone. I will see you in the next one. Bye.